I'm in the big leagues, told them don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding the road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now. So I need that go, y'all. Got hits when he throwing the fastball. Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor. I got too much, I gotta tend to.
Welcome back to another episode of Another Turnover, the podcast where an NBA fan with zero basketball credibility gives his opinions on what's going on in the NBA. Opinions that nobody asked for. As always, I am your host, Mr. Chris Aaron Murphy, aka Aaron. And ladies and gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. So, we've had a pretty good week so far in the NBA. Some pretty good games that were on national television and some pretty good games that weren't on national television. So, I am going to take a look at some highlighted games or games that I highlighted that I want to talk about. So, if you know me in real life, if you know me in person, everybody knows that I am a Spurs fan. I'm a diehard Spurs fan. I've been a Spurs fan for as long as I can remember. So I definitely got to talk about the Lakers-Spurs game that happened this past Tuesday. So the Lakers, unfortunately, did defeat the Spurs in a really tough overtime game that finished 125, or the final score, was 125 to 121 with Los Angeles taking the victory in San Antonio. This one was definitely a heartbreaker for me. You know, I was crushed to see the Lakers win this game. I mean, I know it's the third, game of the year. Don't get me wrong. I'm not too upset. But I was sad to see, San Antonio unfortunately lose this game. It kind of reminded me of those classic, Lakers-Spurs games from way back in the early, mid-2000s, even a little bit of the late 2000s as well when, back in the Lakers team with Kobe and Powell. But, yeah, I was kind of heartbroken. The first half was mostly back and forth. I think it was like a 2-point victory or a 2-point lead for the Spurs at halftime. But San Antonio kind of dominated the third quarter, but then the Lakers came right back and dominated and outscored the Spurs in the fourth quarter to send the game to overtime. Now there was no LeBron in this game, so there's a caveat with it. But the Spurs young core had really, really solid showings. Jakob Poeltl, which 27 points, 14 rebounds. I was like, who is that and where has he been since that Kawhi Leonard trade? Because he came over from the Toronto Raptors. I ain't seen that from him. Shoot, if we could get that every game, we might make a little noise, but can't depend on Jakob Poeltl for 27 and 14. But shout out to him. He had a really good game. Lonnie Walker had 21 points. Devin Vassell had 19 points. DeJounte Murray had a really, really solid triple-double. 21 points, 15 assists, and 12 rebounds. I saw a statistic the other day. He's already top 3 all time, I think, for Spurs triple-doubles. He's put up a lot of triple-doubles. So he's definitely in a great class there. But the Lakers kind of matched the impressive showing from the young core in San Antonio. They kind of matched it with their main 2 stars, the 2 out of their big 3. Anthony Davis had a monster 35 points and 17 rebounds, while Russell Westbrook put in a 33-point triple-double. But like I said, in the end, it was the Lakers who were able to secure the victory in overtime by 4 points. Unfortunately, this Spurs team just doesn't have a closer. We have a really, really solid young core that likes to get up and down, and they play hard, and they give maximum effort. But we don't really have anyone down the stretch in close game to go to and hey, we need you to get us a bucket. It's not Doug McDermott. He's a solid 3-point shooter, but he's not, he's not Dougie McBuckets like he was in Creighton. Those days are long gone. It's not DeJounte Murray. He's our primary, decision maker and point guard. Lonnie Walker is a pretty decent scorer, but we just don't have that guy. It's hey, here's the ball, go win this game for us. So whenever we have a close game, we definitely struggle because it's a collective unit, but when the game gets tight, I feel like in order to be successful, you really need that guy who is going to get you a basket and take you the rest of the way. But it was a good game nonetheless. The main question that I have coming out of this game was, should the Lakers be concerned with how well Russell Westbrook played in this game without LeBron James? Like I mentioned, he had a 33-point triple-double. I think he had 33, 10, and 10, if I'm not mistaken. But he was moving the ball well. He was getting to his spots. He took 27 shots. without, LeBron James being there. So should the Lakers be concerned with how well he played? You would think that that's an interesting thing. Like, well, if he played well, the Lakers would be happy, but there was no LeBron. So obviously he's not going to be getting 27 shots when LeBron isn't there. So it'll be interesting to see how he is going to adjust. Like, can he find his rhythm off of 13 shots or maybe, 11, 12 shots or however many? Can he find his rhythm there? He was only I think 1 of 4 from the 3-point line. So still, we all know Russell Westbrook's not a great shooter, but I think there is, some level of concern for him being able to find his place in the offense with him, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James all on the court at the same time. Because without him, he looked great. He looked like the Russell Westbrook, that we have been grown accustomed to since his Oklahoma City days. But can he have this level of production or a similar level of production with LeBron James being on the court? So the jury remains to be seen. Obviously, we're 4 or 5 games into the season, so we shall see what comes of that later on in this season. But one of the other games I wanted to highlight was pretty good this past week. We had the Miami Heat had a really good showing against the Brooklyn Nets, winning 106-93 this past Wednesday. So this was definitely an impressive early season win for the Miami Heat. They had 5 players in double figures. I think you had Bam Adebayo in double figures. You had Tyler Hero off the bench with double figures. A few other players that names I'm blanking on right now had really, really solid outings. Jimmy Butler put in a really good double-double, nearly a triple-double, had 17 points, 14 rebounds, and 7 assists. But the Miami Heat were able to actually win this game while having not so great performances from Kyle Lowry and Duncan Robinson. They kind of had off nights. I think Duncan Robinson had 8 points. Kyle Lowry only had 7 points, and neither one of them shot the ball particularly well. But as far as the Brooklyn side goes, Kevin Durant did his thing. He had 25 points and 11 rebounds. His co-star, James Harden, only put in 14 and 7. So not a great game for James Harden. He's definitely kind of struggled this season. One of my coworkers made the joke to me that James Harden was washed. I mean, he's definitely not getting to the line as much. He is not shooting all that well, not making plays for others in the way that we have seen him over the past, 4 or 5 seasons. So should Brooklyn be concerned about, James Harden? He did say that, he wasn't able to rehab during the summer, which, okay, I mean, he was out with a little baby over the summer, so I'm like, you was able to, party and hang out with a little baby, but, why wasn't you doing any rehab? But that's a story for another day. But the Heat had a really, really solid game. Like I said, they out-rebounded the Nets by 20. They had more points in the paint as well. So they definitely kind of controlled that game from the beginning to end. So the main question that I had coming out of this highlighted game was about Miami. Was this a statement victory for Miami? If you remember in the season premiere when I gave my the second episode of this season when I gave my way too early predictions, I've got Miami early, so I predicted Miami finishing at the 3rd spot in the Eastern Conference, just behind Brooklyn or Milwaukee and Brooklyn, however you want to put it. I could see either one of those being interchangeable. But I've got them as the 3rd best team coming out of the Eastern Conference. So I definitely think this was more of a statement victory, not so much for everybody else, but for Miami Heat. The Miami Heat team rather than everybody else. Like I said, having them finish 3rd, I think they're better than Boston right now. I think they're better than Atlanta. I think they're better than Philadelphia, with their whole issues with Ben Simmons. I think they're better than the Knicks as well. So they have a really, really solid mix of shooting and veterans, defense, and playmaking. So I think all the pieces that they got, acquiring PJ Tucker, acquiring Kyle Lowry, and some other pieces that they got, it seems as if they fit really well together. And they've got a lot of dog and a lot of fight on that team, led by Jimmy Butler and PJ Tucker, a lot of tough guys, so they're not scared. So I definitely think they can make some noise in the Eastern Conference. Them finishing 3rd, they would have to, depending on the seeding, have to play Milwaukee or Brooklyn in the second round if, those teams obviously advance. But they can make some noise. I still pick Brooklyn to come out of the Eastern Conference. Still early in the season. But Miami Heat, I think they definitely can do some damage. So I will be looking forward to seeing that. But the third game that I wanted to talk about the Atlanta Hawks and the New Orleans Pelicans game from this past Wednesday, the 27th. So the Hawks defeated the Pelicans in New Orleans 102-99. The Hawks survived an early deficit in this game. They definitely kind of came out flat, started off a little slow. They were down 14 points after the first quarter, but they definitely bounced back in the second quarter and third quarter, going up by quite a bit. And this was mostly led by the defensive prowess of Clint Capella and John Collins. Clint Capella had 12 rebounds and 3 blocks, whereas John Collins put in 16 points and 12 rebounds. But they were obviously led offensively, the Atlanta Hawks were, that is, by Trae Young and his scoring ability, putting in 31 points, 7 assists off a decent shooting night as well. But the Hawks had more rebounds and they had more points in the paint. They kind of were able to take advantage of some miscues of the New Orleans Pelicans at the end of the game by Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram had a shot to, I believe, either tie the game at the end when it was about 98 apiece, or put them ahead, if I'm not mistaken, and unfortunately missed the entire rim. So no shade to Brandon Ingram, but wasn't able to pull it out for them. But Devontae Graham had a pretty good game. I think he led the Pelicans with 21 points, if I'm not mistaken. But the question that I had coming out of this game was, can the Hawks make another run at the Eastern Conference Finals? So last year, with them beating the Knicks in the first round, then beating Philadelphia in that grueling, 7-game series, and then eventually getting beat by the eventual champs, Milwaukee Bucks. Everybody's like, okay, is Atlanta for real? Or, were they able to kind of take advantage of, injuries and the situation with Ben Simmons? I definitely think Atlanta, that it was a little early for them last year. They definitely overachieved, because if you look at all those preseason stuff from last year, as far as, who was going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals and all that stuff, nobody picked Atlanta to get to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. I mean, even people who live in Atlanta were probably a little skeptical at best. But can they make another run this year? Obviously, they have that deep playoff experience. Trae Young is, still one of the, say, top 10, point guards in the NBA. You've got Herder coming off the bench, Bogdanovich, Gallinari, John Collins. They've got a solid team. I was talking to one of my coworkers about, I'm a little skeptical about their defense, but with John Collins and Clint Capella as their defensive anchors, and DeAndre Hunter, that I keep forgetting about as well, who's their starter, and Cam Reddish coming off the bench, they're versatile. I wouldn't be too surprised if they're able to make it to the Eastern Conference, because I have them finishing 5th, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say they end up beating, whoever in the first round. They more than likely play, like I said, Miami also would either play Milwaukee or Brooklyn in the second and third rounds. Like, either way, the Eastern Conference has got to go through Milwaukee or Brooklyn. So can you beat one of those teams, or can you beat both of those teams? Having a lower seed against them, winning on the road is definitely not going to be an easy task. But Atlanta's definitely got a shot to make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I'm not picking them to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals, but like I said, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if they did get back there like they did last year. But we shall see. But let's transition just a little bit. Let's transition to around the association and some of the stories and storylines, I should say, that have come out from this past week. So I gotta talk about Russell Westbrook. So Russell Westbrook this past Wednesday got ejected from the game at the end of the game in a loss to his former team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder ended up beating the Lakers 123-115, like I said, this past Wednesday. So Darius Bazley, whose name I just learned right before I was looking at this episode, ended up stealing the ball late from the Lakers and dunked it with less than 2 seconds left in the game. Well, apparently that's an unwritten rule in basketball, not to, show up your opponent and all this stuff. So Russell Westbrook definitely took exception to it. He felt he was getting shown up. He got in his face, Darius' face that is, and yelled, hey man, don't do that, all this stuff. Russ said basically after the game, in basketball, there's just certain things that you don't do. There's just certain things that you don't do in sports. In my opinion, that whole thing is a non-issue. It's a non-story. And throughout that game, you were up more than 20 points. The Lakers, I think, were up, at most they were up by 26 points. And they gave up all those points to end up losing by 8. You're upset that your opponent scored the basketball. Maybe you should stop them. Maybe you should play defense, or maybe you should do something, foul him. I don't know, but maybe you should do something to prevent him from scoring the ball. I think when Darius stole the ball at the end of the game, I believe the Thunder were up either 3 or 4 points, and so by him dunking that, put them up by 6 points, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on those point totals, but the game was pretty much over after he stole the ball, so he could have ran it out and whatnot, and I get that, but I don't think it was a situation of him showing him up. I would definitely understand where Russell Westbrook was coming from if he stole the ball and they're up by like 20 points, or they're up by 25, but the Thunder had come back down from more than 20 points. So, I mean, him stealing the ball and dunking it at the end, I don't think that was a big deal. You know, some people may feel differently about that, and that's fine, whatever, do you. But I just don't think that this is an issue at all. And Russell Westbrook, like, getting ejected from the game, like, it was just unnecessary. Like, the game is over. Hey, like, you lost a big lead. That's on you. Like, if you don't want him scoring, you need to stop him next time. Like, because nobody went after him. So, I mean, it is what it is. That's how I feel about that situation. I think Russell Westbrook we definitely know, you know, he's a fiery player. He's emotional, but it's a non-issue. So, Russ, get over it. Get out of your feelings. You'll be fine. Move on to the next game. But the next story we got that came out around the association, Damian Lillard talking about his optimism with the Portland Trail Blazers, saying that this team can compete. He is, and I quote, he is optimistic. He is a believer in this team, and he loves this organization. So he definitely believes that the team could look a lot different and play a lot different with Chauncey Billups. Unfortunately, I think this is pretty much wishful thinking. The roster didn't improve at all. Like I already kind of talked about in some earlier episodes. You know, they lost Carmelo Anthony. They traded Gary Trent Jr. to get Norman Powell. But they lost Zach Collins, who had been injured, you know, in and out of the lineup over the past couple of years. But this roster, compared to the rest of the teams in the Western Conference, even some of the lower seeds, like with Damian Lillard, obviously is a superstar, a megastar in the NBA, but you just don't have, like, it's not a good enough roster. Like, this is not a championship level roster. Now, I do think Chauncey Billups has the potential to be a great coach. He was an excellent coach for the Los Angeles Clippers as an assistant. We know Chauncey Billups as a player, as the 2004 NBA Finals MVP, back when he was the Detroit Pistons point guard. So, I mean, I definitely think that Chauncey Billups can do a really, really good job. But the coach can only do so much when the roster is mediocre at best. And, like, the West is cutthroat. Like, most of your top-level teams have 2 superstar players. So, unfortunately, like I said, I think this is wishful thinking on the part of Damian Lillard. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the Trailblazers are, underachieving and underperforming, and I wouldn't be surprised if Russell Westbrook, if Damian Lillard ends up asking for a trade before the deadline that comes in February. But we shall see. But last piece of news around the association, we got NBA insider Mark Stein reported that the NBA will not air Thursday night programming on TNT. No Inside the NBA, unfortunately, on Thursdays until January. Now, they're still going to be doing doubleheaders on Tuesdays, so we'll get to see our boy Shaq, Ernie, Kenny, and Chuck. But the report is that the NBA prefers not to compete with the NFL on Thursday nights, which this kind of makes me sad because the Inside the NBA is the best, like, NBA programming show there is. One of the greatest sports programs, in my opinion. One of the greatest sports programs that there's ever been. Like, the chemistry between, you know, Ernie Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, and Kenny the Jet Smith. Like, it's been some of the funniest moments in TV that I've ever watched. So, not seeing them on Thursday nights, they've been a Thursday night staple for a long time now with the 4 of them, you know, ever since Shaq retired 11, 12 years ago, however long it was. So I'm a little sad about that. I'm a little sad that we're not going to see Thursday night Inside the NBA. But just goes to show America still loves their football, which is fine. Football is exciting, but, you know, it's no basketball, at least in my opinion. But usually Thursday night games, NFL games that I've watched, typically aren't that good. Like, usually the NFL doesn't even usually put on their best product on Thursday night. So it definitely says a lot that, hey, the NFL is still top dog in the United States. So unfortunately, at least unfortunately for me, but the hierarchy still kind of goes, NFL, NBA, MLB, at least in my opinion, for your top three major sports for America, I should say. But no Inside the NBA on Thursday nights until January, so it is what it is. We got to wait a little bit. I'm just a little sad about it because I love seeing those guys, and that's one of my favorite TV shows. But let's do another transition. Let's transition again into this weekend's marquee matchup. So if you guys remember correctly, so last week's marquee matchups, so the three games that I highlighted were the Phoenix Suns and the Lakers, the Brooklyn Nets and the Sixers, and then the Grizzlies and the Clippers. So I correctly predicted the Nets beating the Sixers. I did get wrong the Lakers and the Clippers winning. The Suns and the Grizzlies ended up winning both of those games. So I'm going to keep track of which games of the marquee matchups that I get right and which ones that I get wrong. So for this week, I have for marquee matchups. So this coming Friday, we got the Charlotte Hornets taking on the Miami Heat. I think that's going to be a pretty good game. We've got Saturday, the Atlanta Hawks taking on the Philadelphia 76ers in a rematch from last year's Eastern Conference semifinals. And then this Sunday, we've got two Western Conference powerhouses, I should say, or at least regular season powerhouses. We have the Utah Jazz taking on the Milwaukee Bucks. So for the Hornets Heat game, I'm going to go with the Miami Heat playing at home. Both teams are actually playing really well. I think both teams only have one loss, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But I'm going to go with the Miami Heat at home. I'm going to go for Saturday's game. I'm going to go with the Atlanta Hawks on the road against the Philadelphia 76ers. I definitely think that this will be an intense game. I think it'll be a close game, but I think Atlanta is going to end up taking it this Saturday. And then as far as Utah and the Milwaukee Bucks go, I am taking the Bucks at home in Milwaukee to beat the Utah Jazz. So we shall see. Like I said, I am keeping track. Hopefully I get all three of these right so I can get out of the red, but we shall see. But ladies and gentlemen, that is all the show I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. I will see you this coming Tuesday. Like I said, hopefully soon we'll have some guests, maybe some friends and family on the show so I can talk basketball with them. But thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Yeah, I told him I'ma hit it out of stands. I deserve another 100 bands. I deserve another 100 fans. Told them this was always in the plans. I just did it cause they said I can. Blowing euros when I'm down in France. Labels asking how I build a brand. Told them put a check up in my hands. What got time, no cap. Made a few checks, but they all in a